So I've been blabbing and blabbing and blabbing about these John McNaughton paintings. And recently, it upset someone very deeply, and that's okay. They're allowed to be upset, but I'm just not going to engage with that. But that's besides the point. In their being upset, they suggested that the only reason I'm doing this is to show off my own intelligence, show off how smart I am. And so I thought I'd talk for a minute, to myself about why exactly I'm carrying on about these McNaughton paintings. So John McNaughton talks about his paintings, and he doesn't just paint them and put them out there. He talks about what he's doing with them. And he sees himself as painting history and creating this image of America. And I think it's important to engage with that, because I think that what he's doing is attempting to monopolize the meaning of America by transforming historical images into mythic symbols. And this folds into the opposition to academic history that we see coming from the Trump administration. And McNaughton is, I think it's fair to say, enamored with Trump and with MAGA and with their attempts to monopolize the use and meaning of history. And like Trump and like the MAGA people, he sees the 1619 Project as a threat to this mythologized history that they cherish. And so that's why I think it's important to engage with it, because what they're doing is not actually engaging in history. What they're doing is transforming history into myth. And what myth does is explain the order of the universe. So by transforming history into a myth, they explain why America is the way it is and why it should be the way it should be. And they then monopolize meaning and take control of and authority over what that history can be. To do this, they have to dislodge the historical images they use. So McNaughton has to dislodge the historical personages that he represents through image from their historical context. He has to blur the lines. He has to cause these people to align. And this is something that he does in his painting. I forget the title of it, but it's got the figures, all the historical figures around Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Donald Trump's sitting at the desk in the aspect of prayer, and all of these historical figures are surrounding him, some of them reaching forward and touching him. And one of the ones that reaches forward and touches Trump, as though passing on his legacy, is Abraham Lincoln. And surrounding Abraham Lincoln are three important figures. In front of Lincoln is Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist. Behind Lincoln, on Lincoln's right, the viewer's left, is Martin Luther King Jr. And behind Lincoln, on Lincoln's left, the viewer's right, barely perceptible, and as far as I've seen, the only instance of his appearance in any of McNaughton's artwork is Robert E. Lee. And so what McNaughton is doing, whether he realizes it or not, is blurring these figures together as though they come together in Lincoln, and all of their different struggles become the same. And then through Lincoln, these are passed on to Trump. And so Trump is, in one instance, the heir of, Robert E. Lee, Martin Luther King, and Frederick Douglass, all as though they're the same. It erases distinctions, it erases who these people were, why they were who they were, what brought them to act the way they did, what disagreements they had, what differences, what different things they stood for. It erases all of that and transforms them into this promotion of a particular version of American identity that McNaughton and Trump and MAGA, all disconnected from each other. I don't think there's like an overarching plan or design. There's no conspiracy here. I think it's more just they're picking up on these cultural themes and weaponizing these themes in order to distinguish between who can and cannot be American today, who can claim that legacy and who cannot, which is interesting because, both Robert E. Lee and people on the Confederate side, and Frederick Douglass and people on the abolitionist side look to similar people as the progenitors of their legacies. Frederick Douglass looked to the Declaration of Independence. Frederick Douglass talked about how the Constitution does not have the word slavery in it, and so how could it be a document that protects slavery? While the Confederates, and if you want to see an example of this, just go to South Carolina's Declaration of Secession. The Confederates, or you could look at what Alexander Stephens said about the Civil War and the purpose of the Civil War, but they look to the Constitution as enshrining and protecting this racial legacy, this racial hierarchy. And they see Douglass and Lincoln as betrayers of that legacy. Lincoln is not really an abolitionist, at least not at first. At least not in the sense that he thinks that he can use the office of the president to abolish slavery. So really the Confederates overreact to Lincoln's election, and then their actions cause the war, and it's the war that makes the abolition of slavery possible. So you see, already in just that short description, we can start to see important differences, important things in the context of who these people are, in the periods that they lived, in what they dealt with, that distinguish them one from another, and make it questionable what their legacy is and why that legacy would be passed on to Donald Trump. And so this is why I think it's important to engage with McNaughton's work, because he's playing with these themes that have been around for a long time, and he's he's painting these themes and giving his own spin on it, reinventing them, and that, myth is malleable, and that's why it's so powerful. But it does not actually reflect a scale map of the universe, and that's the problem, is it creates this scale map of the universe by blurring all the lines between the images that it uses in order to transform these images into symbols of its own meaning, and then uses those symbols to turn around and impose rigid lines on culture and identity and politics. And so that's why I think it's important to engage with John McNaughton's work, especially because his work deals very heavily, or is informed very heavily, by a particular brand of Mormon apocalypticism that has, for a long time, been something that I'll just be honest, something that I've wanted to pull apart. Something that I've wanted to pull apart and show all the contradictions and all the reformulated meaning and appropriated symbols and all of this, and how this does not actually present a model of the universe that is useful beyond enforcing our own ideas about behavior and identity and politics.